Good evening. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at the numerous and complex causes of the Great Depression. No one single human behavior or government policy caused the stock market to crash and our economy to falter. There is no one date or one event that actually sets this in motion. It's the numerous economic behaviors and government policies mixed together that caused the Great Depression. So let's begin to take a look. First, we need to talk about how our economy had been changing over the last 50 years. Industrial change typically is a good thing. However, we're going to find that some people are being left behind. We call these sick industries. These are parts of the economy that as a whole were doing poorly with no end in sight. For example, coal mining. Coal mining, where entire cities were being built in the Appalachians, West Virginia and Pittsburgh, was now being replaced by both oil and mechanization. In short, we are going to start to see coal mining die out as a way of life. This kills cities and in some ways, some states. Cotton farming. Of course, cotton farming had been the backbone of some southern plantations, but now as we head into the 1900s, farming, specifically for cotton, was being challenged by foreign cotton and synthetics. When the price of cotton falls too short, cotton production isn't profitable. You can't have a lot of employees farming. You have to sell bits of your land to banks. You lose bits of your land to the banks. Lastly, in a very similar fashion, food. Just the general process of being a farmer when you grow food is being challenged by foreign markets. And a lot of price decrease or stabilization was occurring because of having railroads being able to ship food from all around the country. As farming is not as profitable as it had been, farmers are losing their farms, farmers are moving to the cities, so we see increase in urbanization, and as today, only 5% of America is in farming. Now let's go a little bit more into agriculture. This is a great story because it is economics, it is the Great Depression, but it's tied to World War I, which we had just studied. So, cause and effect. Farmers increased output during World War I. In short, farmers were feeding the world. Now, to keep up with that production, farmers did something that's good. They took on some debt. They went and bought John Deere tractors, for example, to keep up with production, to increase production. Sometimes debt is good, but of course, there is some troubles with that. See, World War I ends and farmers are left in debt. The demand had decreased, but the farmer still owed money. Do understand that farmers, because of nature, literally nature's elements, Mother Nature, they always were charged higher interest rates for their loans. So instead of having to pay back 10% interest rates on the loans for that John Deere tractor, they're up to 17 to 20 to 25% interest. Now the demand has decreased. The price of what they were selling has gone down. Farmers are left in debt. When prices decline, deflation in agricultural produce, the farmers have little to do. All right, next topic. This is a very general statement. In the 19-teens and the 1920s, in America, the rich got richer, the poor got poorer, and the middle class saw very little change. This is a bit of a class warfare slide, I acknowledge. But what we need to understand is prices were increasing in the 20s, and the salaries just didn't keep up. So, at some point, demand has to plateau. If you're not getting an increase in your salary, there will be a point where you can't buy another refrigerator, you can't buy another vacuum cleaner because you don't have enough money. And tied to that, the inflation of the 20s was going up at a faster pace than the cost, than the actual salaries. So what was happening is people were going into debt to afford things. This kind of leads us to the stock market. We have to understand that during the 1920s, people were taking on debt. The farmers had been taking on debt in the teens to produce farming equipment, and now the average American, to middle class to upper middle class, was taking on debt to buy luxury goods and even to invest in the stock market. So, here's a term for you to understand: speculation. It's when you buy stock with the hopes that its value increases. Hopes. Well, when I go to Atlantic City, I hope I win. I hope I get blackjack. We have to acknowledge that there is little control that people had of the stock market in the 1920s. So when they went to the stock market, they are investing their money. They were taking a risk. There was a general get-rich-quick mentality. With the economy doing well in parts of the 20s and in the teens, people had money, especially the people that we would consider rich or more affluent. So they were like, let's use my money and get rich quick. The worst part of this, and I'm laughing and I am going to digress on this one, people were literally borrowing money, not to buy a house, not to buy a farm, but to invest in the stock market. Now follow me. This means people are risking future wealth because they're taking money and having to owe debt. They're taking future wealth and investing in the stock market. And they're even fooling around because banks were permitting this. Banks not only were permitting these loans, they were also investing their own money. For example, I take my money, I bring it to a bank. Fine, the bank's holding my money. The bank legally doesn't have to hold all that money sitting inside some sort of cell. So they invest that money to make themselves richer and to also pay my interest back. Well, between people and banks, we have a lot of risky business. On 10/29/29, with the stock market crash, this get-rich-quick mentality comes back to haunt not just the average investor, corporate investor, but banks as well. See, in general, people were living outside their means. They were buying on credit. Now, today we call that credit cards, but back then we would call it installment buying. I want to buy this refrigerator. I'm going to pay for it $5 a month, even though I can't afford the final price. By the end of the 1920s, 60% of cars and 80% of radios were bought on this type of installment credit. People were even borrowing money to invest in the stock market. This is something for you to understand. It can be a little complex to rush through. Something was occurring called buying on margin. So take your time on this topic. When you buy on margin, you buy a piece of stock. You're only forced to pay 10% of that stock's value. So the stock is $100. You only have to pay 10 because you think that that stock's value is going to go up. So you never need to have $100 because it's going to go up and you'll quickly to be 101, 102, 120, and then you could sell it for a very nice profit. But what happened, if you think about it, on 10/29/29, the stock market crashes. And all of the, we'll call them bookies, of all the people that you had gone to as brokers now want their money back. Problem, you only paid $10 for that stock. That stock was $100. It fell down to $80. You now need to do your math. You owe $70 more. You have to pay that broker $70 because your stock market, the stock had fallen. I'm trying to think if that's right. No, it's not right. Dang it. No, you would have to owe the broker that $90 difference. Yeah, what am I saying there? You would owe the broker $90 difference because your money you had invested 100 even though you only had to pay 10. All right, complex issue that I even stumbled over. Okay, so let's look. Living outside our means, stock market, rich v poor, agriculture. Now, let's talk about more how economies work. And this is something called the business cycle. This is where you believe that the economy naturally goes through highs and lows. Herbert Hoover believed that the economy would naturally fix itself. And he's not too wrong. I'll give an example. Around 1970, 1980, 1990, and around 2000. In all of those 10 years, we had what you would call recessions, around 10 years. This shows you that every so often the economy booms and the economy flattens. This is gotten shorter over the last 15 years, with the economy booming for a little time and then quickly flattening. But let's take a look at how the business cycle works. I liken this to the wheels on the bus that go round and round. First, you have a time of prosperity. Now, the question is, how did you get to that time of prosperity, and what do you do in that time of prosperity? I show the business cycle as a wheel, though you could show this as a linear line with troughs and highs and lows. So, during a time of prosperity, a business expands, taking on debt, good debt, to be richer. Now, how do you expand? You hire more employees, you build bigger buildings, warehouses, you buy more tractor trailers. This causes an increase in production. You have more workers, you have more facility, you can produce more sneakers or books, whatever you're making. When you have more production, it's only logical that you hire more workers to produce more. This then in turn causes another increase in production. Everything sounds great so far. Mo money, mo money, mo money, surplus. There will be a point where no one wants to buy your books or your sneakers or your mugs, whatever you're making. The demand will outweigh, the demand will drastically decrease, yet you're still producing en masse. When you have a surplus, the value of whatever you're making goes down. This is terrible. This causes a decrease in production, which logically causes you to fire workers until you get to a smaller, more manageable surplus and higher demand. Now just take a look at this. The economy was good, but then the economy shot itself in the foot. No one needed another iPad. No one needed another pencil. No one needed another coffee mug. Once you have a small, manageable surplus over time, you can increase production. Now, let me tell you, the business cycle then was predicated on you making the same model car, the same model vacuum, and the same model refrigerator. Today, the business cycle is different because anytime there is a surplus of iPhone 4s, you can just go buy an iPhone 4S. And if you ever wonder why Apple, for example, keeps making things and every year seems to have a new model of something, including a watch you can talk into, that is probably because it wants to circumvent the business cycle. Now, if you're Herbert Hoover, if you are a conservative, history has shown you that the economy will flatten, and that's bad, but the economy will get back to its feet. And you don't need to rescue the economy. You don't need to save people because they will save themselves. They'll either learn to adapt in a very social, Darwinistic way, or they will go out of business. And if they go out of business, then they weren't meant to compete in the economy. All right. Now, similar to the business cycle, where the government doesn't need to get involved with the surplus or decreasing and increasing production. We have trickle-down economics. This is a combination of social Darwinism and capitalism. It's kind of like give tax cuts and low interest loans, and I'm going to use the word rich. What I mean by that is the people who are having successful companies, either successful small businesses or, of course, successful large businesses. If you cut their taxes, if you give them low interest loans, they will spend the money. They will hire people. Eventually, we will have an increase in the supply of goods and thus an increase in the supply of jobs. We, in essence, expect the rich, the businesses, to invest their money, and when they do that, that money will trickle down by providing jobs for others. Now that you have more of a supply of goods and workers, you have more people to tax. More goods means more sales tax. More workers means more income tax. Now, all of this is predicated on the belief that you have to give money to those in the economy most worth and able to handle it. Giving money directly to a needy person helps that needy person. Giving a tax cut to an entire corporation allows them to hire hundreds, maybe thousands. So I use the concept of trickle-down economics as helping the government, helping motivate the economy by helping big business. Now we're still on another cause of the Great Depression. This one deals with the Fed. Now, this may not make any sense until I go through the slide. During the 1920s, the economy was too hot, and our Federal Reserve should have done something. The Fed should have raised interest rates. It would have cooled our economy so prices didn't get so high, so we didn't have a gigantic surplus. But instead, they waited until the Depression hit. They should have lowered interest rates. So follow me. They raised interest rates once the Depression hit. Poor timing on the Fed. They should have, watch my visual here, they should have lowered interest rates. That means more money in the hands of the people. People are going to borrow, companies could borrow, corporations could borrow, and then they could spend. But instead, interest rates increased. Thus, people weren't spending, banks were lending, and I got to do a drum roll here. We have deflation. Deflation is terrible for an economy. Prices drop. Employees thus are fired to make sure the company can be profited. However, sometimes you can't lower your prices anymore, and you go out of business. Thus, instead of laying off a few workers, you're out of business. Hundreds of workers are out. In my opinion, and I'm not an economist, deflation is terrible. It's terrible for the private sector, and the economy needs to be protected from deflation. Now, at the same time, we have monetary policy that's seeing interest rates being raised at the worst time. We also seeing tariffs being raised. The government passed the Hawley-Smoot tariff, which was not something Herbert Hoover wanted, but it's not something he stopped. Taxes were raised on foreign goods. This is called protectionism. You want Americans to buy American. Why buy foreign? We need to help our own economy. But what happens is Americans couldn't afford American goods, and now by passing the Hawley-Smoot tariff, other countries are passing their own increase in taxes on foreign goods. And we have a tariff war. We now have stagnant, stopped, slowed foreign trade. We're not buying foreign, they're not buying us. We are now part of a global depression. Very close to the end, everybody, at 19 minutes here. Lastly, I think I want to focus on fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the policy run by Congress and the President of the United States. This one typically deals with taxing and spending. So Herbert Hoover had decreased taxes in 29. Everybody in this room probably likes that idea. When you decrease taxes in 29, you increase demand and you increase production. This is good for an economy. But see, he's stimulating an overly stimulated economy. And then in 1932, he increases taxes. This decreases demand and this decreases production. In short, people have less money to spend on the private sector. Now follow me. Herbert Hoover believed in a balanced budget, and he was worried that the government was spending too much money starting in 29, 30, and 31. So he increased taxes to try and keep that balanced budget. But by doing that, just like the Hawley-Smoot tariff and just like the Fed increasing interest rates, you're decreasing demand because people don't have money to spend. You're only exacerbating deflation, thus intensifying the Depression. The Depression hit in 29, and all the factors we've looked at just pile onto it. Some caused it, some took it, and then just exacerbated it. Our next topic will be, how did Herbert Hoover fight this depression? Now I'm going to backtrack. Cause of the Great Depression: sick industries, agriculture, World War I, the rich v. poor, the stock market, living outside our means, business cycle, trickle-down economics, monetary policy, tariffs, fiscal policy. And by the way, if I wanted to, I can just switch these out because tariffs are part of fiscal policy too. So here it is, guys. In 22 minutes, I've gone over the causes of the Great Depression. We're going to deal with these in class during a DBQ, and also as we talk about a way to help memorize all of these. You're going to see that a lot of these come back to haunt the United States in 2006, 7, and 8 when our economy goes into the Great Recession. Have a good day.